I can't see the slides. I'm not that smart.
She's not got her autocue.
I haven't got my autocue for today. I think I've done enough talking for one day.
John, go on.
Okay, so first things as per PBL, we looked at the problem and straight away set out, our learning outcomes that we wanted from this session. And these were basically determining why students actually want feedback, which followed on from our little task when we first started, when we all went into the library or the smoking shed or wherever you went. Okay, so on top of actually identifying why students want feedback, we then started to look at different methods for giving feedback, specifically to large groups of 150 plus, so what various methods. And then we went on to look at how to actually implement feedback and make it standard, consistent across all teaching assessment methods. They were our three main outcomes we wanted. We could have listed plenty, but we thought just keep it focused, concise, do those three well.
Okay, so Liz, do you want to talk back about the one that you looked into? This is where you'll struggle to see it.
I know, I can't see that. Okay, so we talked about why students wanted feedback and what were their motivations for feedback. And we came up with kind of two sides of it. We found something quite interesting about what the HEA Academy says about feedback. And that goes into, say, quite a lot of different things, some of which I don't think we had necessarily thought of at all, including, and obviously if it was bigger you'd be able to see it and read it for yourself, but I'll read it out to you, shall I? Including, it facilitates the development of self-assessment, i.e. reflection in learning, encourages teacher and peer dialogue around learning, which is something that we talked about, and I think that's quite good for students to know that they can learn from learning from each other and not just from us. It helps to clarify what good performance is, and that's really what related most to the feedback that we got from the students out there. I'll come to that in a second. They also said it provides the opportunities to close the gap between current and desired performance, so just marry them up a bit more. It delivers high quality information to students about their learning. It encourages positive motivational beliefs and self-esteem. And last but not least, to be too boring, it provides information to teachers that can be used to help shape the teaching, so you know where you need to go with it. The students themselves, really, in terms of the feedback that we did out there, and we put it all together on the floor and we had a look at it, there were kind of two things that came recurring over and over and over again. They said they wanted feedback because they want to see how they're doing and how they're progressing. And that is literally what everybody said. We need to know how we're doing, we need to know how we're progressing. Some people said, it will highlight their strengths and weaknesses and see whether they're failing. Which relates back to the ones from the HE talking about, clarifying what good performance is and encouraging positive motivational beliefs. So although, there's obviously quite a lot in terms of feedback from our point of view, the students mostly seem just absolutely focused on
one-dimensional about
it. Tell me how I'm doing, that's what I need feedback for. And I think maybe they don't see the value because they don't necessarily really understand feedback and perhaps don't see the value in some of the other ways of giving feedback and some of the other kind of purpose of giving feedback. Mostly it was just very much, tell me how I'm doing, am I failing?
While we were discussing that particular around what students want from it, we had just some other discussions that I just wanted to capture here. And one was about the fact that feedback doesn't necessarily have to come from tutors. What about peer feedback? And the other thing we were talking about is people heard of the sandwich model of feedback. So the idea is that when you're giving feedback, you kind of give them some positive feedback. Then you might give them their constructive criticism, and then you might finish it off or say goodbye to them with a bit of a pat on the back and some more positive feedback. So the more negative constructive criticism bit is sandwiched in the middle of lots of praise and bigging them up. So that was kind of, we had it, and we kind of, when we were doing our research, we found arguments for and against that mode of feeding back really. And we were having a discussion about whether that was good or not. Hey, do you want to do all that? No? We were looking at the exploring methods of giving feedback to large numbers of people, and some of the ideas that we had here were about, in terms of verbal feedback, we thought what would be useful was to invite groups of people to a set time tutorial. We had a discussion about kind of saying, right, everyone who got 70 to 80% come with me now, you know, which wouldn't be good because people wouldn't necessarily want to be seen by everybody standing up and leaving the room with another group, you know. So we were saying you could invite people to groups of feedback at certain times so that they come together, so say perhaps all the people who did fail or all the people who got kind of 40 to 50%, and you could have give them some verbal feedback, and that would also encourage some group discussion and maybe some kind of group ideas about how to improve. So we thought that was quite a good idea about getting a message to a lot of people, having sort of say half-hour sessions. We talked about audio feedback, uploading audio files onto Blackboard or into a Dropbox. That as a, you know, to save you writing 150 bits of individual feedback, that might be quite useful. Jump in if there's anything you want to add to that.
With the audio feedback, you know, it can appear more personal, and as well as with the audio aspect, you can often take sort of hidden meanings that aren't present in written text. For example, a certain emphasis on key points might be just as much as you should have included this, or you really should have included this. You can tell by the meaning that the teacher puts on something how much you really should know or you really should have included it. So there's like different meanings you get from the audio that you can't necessarily get from text.
We thought about self-assessment in advance of getting tutors' feedback, so actually getting people to perhaps think of themselves about how they think they did in an essay before receiving the feedback.
So giving them feedback was something we initially, giving them the feedback and then asking them, based on that feedback, how do you think?
Or doing it the other way around, asking before.
Yeah, or asking them before, because a lot of the time, we talked about personal experience, you know, that would make a student kind of look at themselves a bit more and be a little bit more reflective on what kind of mark they would expect to get.
Yeah. Again, we talked about peer feedback with a large group. Again, I'm sure there's lots of ways you'd have to think about managing this carefully, but you could get people to work in pairs and swap essays if they were happy to share that and give each other feedback maybe from their essays. And then we also thought about setting assessments which could be marked in class. So again, obviously it wouldn't be I have a real issue with summative and formative. It wouldn't be summative. I have to go through this whole process of how I remember it. So it would be a formative measure of feedback, but that might be something which would work. So that was just some ideas for giving feedback to large numbers of people. As well as things like what you guys were talking about using clickers maybe. And then finally, John.
That's me. Okay, so we looked at, you know, how you're going to implement the feedback and how you're going to standardise it across teaching, because I mean, I'm sure we've all seen it. As students, we've had different levels of feedback from different tutors. We probably see it within our teams at the minute. Different lecturers will give one line, whereas others might give, you know, a good paragraph. So it's just how you're going to standardise it across the board, if you like. So I mean, the key way is doing this, team meetings, you know, get together, sort of have reviews on the feedback that we're giving out, as well as just the actual mark. So more of an emphasis of the moderation, not just on the mark, but the actual level of feedback that you're giving as well. So it's an agreed way that you can give the feedback. So whether it's audio, whether it's written, the style that it's written in, that all members of the team are happy that they can actually give the feedback in that way. Obviously, using the grade descriptors, so you've got sort of your zeros, your 100%, your excellence, your outstandings, using those in a uniform way that everyone understands and can relate to. That's a key factor as well. I think that's it. And just when you're moderating as well, just make sure, as well as sort of clarifying the marks, just query any differences in the actual written feedback as well.
Yeah, because we find at the moment that moderated, you know, I mean, we moderate within our team, but we'll comment on it, but we don't actually do much about it. So we might say, oh, there's two different levels of feedback going on here, where one mark is only giving very minimal and another mark is giving a lot, but that's kind of where it stays, really. So maybe we need to be a bit more proactive if you're a module leader, actually, or, you know, with the team about actually looking at more consistency. And then final thoughts, we just found this quote, which we thought was quite interesting and kind of a bit sad, really. It's in this paper, and it basically said, all students reported that the worst feedback was receiving no feedback at all, as can be seen in the following comment. And this undergraduate international student says, I guess anything more than a cross would be really good feedback, because it shows the tutors, are actually reading my answers properly and not just marking the final answer. So thank goodness, I hope we do more than just a cross. And